everyone, welcome to TheGeoecolologist. So in this session, we are going to talk about principles of ecology. So earlier we have already talked about the basic concepts, definitions and various attributes, various levels of organization in ecology in last lecture. So in today's lecture, we are going to understand that what is its building block. What are the principles on which this entire ecological pyramid, ecological concepts, right, are built? What is the basis for that? So this is going to be the discussion in today's session. So let's go ahead. So first thing that we need to understand that there is basic fundamental ecological principles as a base on which it is important to describe various aspects of living organisms. So whatever we discuss about the living organisms and its interaction with the neighboring surrounding, it's all based on these fundamental ecological principles. That's why it is important to understand these fundamental ecological principles. For example, we are going to look at certain examples, certain quotations that which are the basic fundamental things involved in ecological studies. So first is adaptation of species. So you must have heard this word many times, adaptation of species. Basically, species needs to adapt. They have this mechanism to adapt in accordance with the situation in environment, in the surroundings. So this is one example of the principle, the fundamental principle of ecology. Evolution and distribution of plants and animals. This is another example that plants and animals, both in flora and fauna kingdom, we have studied and seen long history of evolution of species, isn't it? So that is another fundamental part of ecology. Then consumption and transfer of energy in different components of biological communities. So what happens in the biological communities? Two things: consumption of energy and also transfer of energy from one form to the other. Okay, so this is a common thread among all biological communities. That is the third example. Then what we see is cycling and recycling of organic and inorganic substances. So remember, nothing is waste in an ecosystem or in ecology. Why? Because it is recycled and cycled again and again in the same system, isn't it? So it is a process of recycling which is again a fundamental to the organic and inorganic substances in the ecology. Interaction and interrelationships. This is again the building block of all ecological organisms. Okay, so interaction becomes another fundamental example. Then interaction between organisms and physical environment. Here the key word is between. So here between organisms and physical environment is important because in the previous line, if you see, it is written among the organisms. So one is intra, within the species, and other is between the species or the physical environment. So intra and inter, two kinds of relationships are important, right? And the last one example is extinction of species. Very commonly we always talk about the list of the UN Red List of extinct bodies and endangered species, isn't it? So extinction of species is another thing. Throughout the history we see that there have been so many phases of extinction of species. So about extinction of species we'll have a separate lecture in details as well. Okay, so these are the basic examples if you see. So what is common in all these examples? These principles, the underlying base, which is the basic principle of all ecological and environmental concepts. Okay, so we'll discuss about 20 principles on which the entire ecological system is balanced and based. So let's go ahead. Number one, first we need to understand what is the building block of ecology. It is ecosystem. Okay, so it's a system of ecology, building block of ecology. Okay, that is called ecosystem. What happens in ecosystem? It is basically a fundamental structure which has units. That is, system has various parts that brings physical environment and living organisms together in a single framework. Then it facilitates the study of interactions between biotic and abiotic components. Biotic is living components, abiotic is non-living components, and in between there is interaction. So this is what is facilitated in which system? The ecosystem, right? So ecosystems are the functional units. This is a basic line from NCERTs if you read. What is it? It's the functional unit. What does functional unit mean? Means it is that basic fundamental parameter of ecology where all the functions are planned. Okay? So, for example, biotic components have autotrophs and heterotrophs, isn't it? So, they also interact. They also have significance as a functional unit, isn't it? Right. So, biotic and abiotic components of biosphere, that we already know what is a biosphere. The interactive sphere is called biosphere. So, biotic and abiotic components of ecosystem are intimately related through series of this large-scale cyclic mechanisms. Okay, that helps in transfer of energy, water, chemicals, sediments. All these various components of nature are transferred in this cyclic mechanism in the entire biosphere. So this is the systematic understanding of the ecosystem, right? Now let's look at further. Principles of ecology. Okay, so first principle, we'll be discussing about 20 basic principles on which the entire functioning and structure is based. So first is, nothing actually disappears. Everything is having cyclic pathways. So what happens when we throw it away? Okay, so it is rearranged and recycled in the system. That is the first principle. Okay, if you see in this image, you see this cyclic system from one to the other and again going back. So this is entire system. Okay, so cyclic pathways is the truth, the principle. Okay, all systems and problems, the second principle. See, it is interrelation that is the second principle. So the first principle was cyclic concept. The second principle is interrelated concept. So interrelation is important. Okay, so we cannot afford the luxury of solving any problem. For example, currently COVID, can you solve it in isolation? Because it is in such a way it is interlinked in the entire world that solving one problem will not be sufficient, because it's a systematic approach. So what happens if one component is there, it is linked to the other is linked to the next. So there is an entire system in which there is an interrelation. So what happens? Obsoletely, people have this idea of solving individual problems, but it doesn't work in ecology. So it has to be largely interrelated solution if it is interrelated problem, because it is basic. Sustained life on Earth. How is this life sustaining on Earth since its inception, isn't it? So this is another principle, that life will be sustained, and the sustenance of life itself is the basic principle. Okay, that's why one organism replaces the other. So individual organisms to population, and they have their replacement, isn't it? You see across these species, sustenance of life becomes the basic principle of ecology. Then, holistic nature of environment. Holistic nature, which means aggregation, accumulation, and interaction. These three things make something holistic. It means it is in a welfare system where everybody is welcome, everybody's role is defined. Okay, so ecology or environment has this holistic nature in itself. It doesn't say somebody that you go out or you come in. Okay, it has space for everything and everyone. That's why it is holistic in nature. So that is which makes it the basic principle, that environment does not discriminate. It is holistic in nature. If you see in the biological system, communities, biospheric systems, right? Then fifth one, the physical and the biological processes follow the principle of uniformity. That is called uniformitarianism. It's a very interesting concept in a way that there is uniformity. In what? So, in processes. So read this statement, take time, just read it. Same physical, that is right from the origin of the planet Earth to the atmosphere making. So same physical and biological processes which are operating today and will operate in future, were operating since the beginning. So these processes is the focus here. When we say uniformity, so what is uniform? The process. So the process always has been there. Which kind of process? Physical and biological process. It has been there since the inception and it will remain there. But what is the difference then? The rates. The rates at which it varies is different, because as a human being influencing the environment, the rates change. That is why we are talking about climate change these days, isn't it? Because climate has been changing, evolving. But why are we worried? Because we are changing the rate of change. Because we are altering the nature's nature. That's why. So uniformitarianism is the basic principle of nature. If we tend to play with nature, we tend to influence it, then there is a problem. Right? Now, natural hazards. So natural hazards affect adversely all the biological communities in general, isn't it? We have seen natural hazards example, if you see the image itself, earthquakes, tsunamis, cyclones, fire, so many things. And all the biological processes are affected. So natural hazard is something which is, the word itself is natural. It is coming from nature. It is nature induced. So it is without any discrimination, it affects all the communities. That is the basic principle of nature or ecology. Then, all living organisms and physical environment are mutually reactive. Now, what does this mean? Mutually reactive means when they interact, they also tend to react. That is the basic meaning, right? So, the varying degrees of interactions among the organisms, both inter and intra-specific levels, okay, between and among themselves, may be positive, negative, and sometimes also neutral. But there is a reaction, okay? There is always a reaction of either positive kind or negative kind, or sometimes also it remains neutral. So one is not affected by the presence of other, but there is a reaction, mutual reaction. That is a basic principle. Then solar radiation. Now we already know that solar radiation is the main driving force, main source of energy for all the activities on Earth, isn't it? Because primary producers are first impacted by that, and then they further help the entire system to work. So photosynthesis is the basic, isn't it? If photosynthesis stops happening, our living existence will go down, isn't it? And what is the source of photosynthesis? It's solar radiation. So it becomes the main basic principle of running of ecosystem. So energy flow. What is important in ecosystem? Energy flow. It is unidirectional and non-cyclic. So once one energy form has been converted to the other, it cannot be converted back. That is the basic system. Although many fictional movies will tell you that it can be done, but don't go into the fiction. Science has yet to see that it can be bidirectional or multidirectional. So still we believe in energy flow in the ecosystem is unidirectional and non-cyclic. Energy cannot be, made back to the previous form. It can only succeed into successive forms. So energy pattern and energy flow are governed by laws of thermodynamics. As we know, what is the law? One form to the other is the thing. Energy cannot be created nor be destroyed. It can change from one form to the other, right? Then energy is transferred from one trophic level. Now what is this level? This trophic level is largely basically talking about the levels at which the communities or the levels of organization, the hierarchy, the structure is placed in terms of energies. So which level has how much energy? So what happens here in trophic level? The organisms at higher trophic level, if you look in the image, okay, so at higher trophic level receive energy from more than one trophic level, because they get energy right from the beginning, accumulating, and then what happens? They tend to receive energy from all different sources because they are highly linked. So higher trophic levels will have more energy, okay? So that is the basic relationship, right? Then relative loss of energy, the 10th important principle, is talking about respiration. Now what is difference between breathing and respiration? This is basic NCERT school days concept. I must understand that you all have gone through this in schools. So what is difference? Breathing is just breathing in and out of air. But what is respiration? When that oxygen that you take in is utilized to break the food, isn't it, that you intake, to digest, and in process they release carbon dioxide. So taking oxygen, digesting the food, and releasing the carbon dioxide. This entire process is respiration. So what happens? There is loss of energy, relative loss of energy due to respiration in where? In different trophic levels. So there is a heat loss at each level. If you look at this image, right from the basic primary producers, if you see 10,000 kilocalorie, what is at the end? If you see the top, only 10. So it is kind of 1/10 law. Okay. So if 10 is at the beginning, only 1 will reach at the top. That's how it is at the next level, right? So that is again the basic principle. Now, because the species at higher trophic levels have more requirement of energy due to higher respiration. That is the basic reason. So if somebody asks you, this happens, it's fine. But why does it happen? Because more energy is lost due to higher level of respiration at higher trophic level. This is automatically there in the nature. Now, the inorganic and organic substances are circulated, cyclic concept again. How? By this process called biogeochemical cycle. The word itself is, one is bio, that is living, geo is earth, that is non-living. So there is a chemical cycle. We have so many cycles: nitrogen cycle, oxygen cycle, carbon cycle, isn't it? So we have all kinds of biogeochemical cycles through which what is maintained? The system is maintained, okay? The components are running. Inorganic and organic components are circulated in the entire system. It doesn't remain static. That's why it makes it dynamic. The ecosystem productivity. Now another important point. So productivity is dependent upon two factors. The first is the availability of amount of solar radiation. Again, we go back to the basic principle. So productivity is based on solar radiation, because at trophic level 1, primary producers use photosynthesis, right? Then efficiency of the plants. Now this is different in different plants. Some plants are more efficient, some will be less efficient. Within a species also, if you see something is more efficient, some is less efficient, so that happens in plants as well as the basic principle. So two factors for ecosystem productivity. Remember, solar radiation and efficiency of the plants to convert solar energy into chemical energy. So that is important. 13th principle is about homeostatic mechanism. That is a self-regulating mechanism of natural balance. How is this balance created? It is a self-regulated balance in the system. So nature itself has a system, a self-regulating mechanism in itself embedded in all the species across all the trophic levels, all the producers, consumers, What is that? It is to get back to normal. Even if it is at stress, it will tend automatically to get back to normal. This self-regulating mechanism is called homeostatic mechanism, or the process is called homeostasis. Alright, so this is important to understand, that homeostasis is the basic of a nature. For example, recently if you see, due to the lockdown situation, what has happened? All the river systems have regulated and maintained themselves solely. So we have spent lakhs of rupees in, so many programs to clean Ganga and Yamuna, but see what has happened. Nature has resurrected, self-regulated itself. So that is what is the basic of nature. It's a basic principle. If you don't stress it, it will get regulated automatically by itself. That is self-inbuilt. And if it is self-inbuilt, that's why it is the basic principle. Then, ecosystem instability. Now, why does this ecosystem become unstable? What is the reason? Who makes it? Because environmental changes are there. So sometimes it is natural trigger, natural environmental change, or external impact. So what happened? Many times people start giving example of dinosaur went extinct. So what happened then? Environmental changes happened. Okay? There are theories of extinction of dinosaurs. So because of certain reason, climate change happened, or meteorite shower happened on the earth, or what happened? The levels of carbon dioxide raised in the air. So what happened? So whatever happened, but basically it is about the environmental change which led to the ecosystem instability. Means the exchange of matter and energy was distributed, which was naturally distributed in the system, became in unstable manner. It became largely uneven. So that created a problem. That's what the basic principle is, that ecosystem instability results when there is an external environmental change. Okay? Now, this is very common. Every one of you, I bet, must studied this in NCERT books. Charles Darwin, 1859, The Evolution of Species, that totally revolutionized the concept of ecosystem and looking at biological sciences. So what was the basic concept? That species evolve over time period. Okay? They are dynamic in nature. So this is the best example of the basic concept of evolution. So evolution, like adaptation, okay, is another important feature, the basic building block of the principle of ecology. Then we have mutation. Very famously, the X-Men series have come up and people started knowing what is mutation, mutant gene. But basic idea is mutation is common to all these species. It's not a specific species, okay, which comes alienated. It's basically engraved in every one of us. So with time, our genes are mutating because it's a gradual spontaneous evolutionary change. If mutation doesn't happen, evolution stops. Okay, so remember, mutation is the basic principle. Alright, okay, so spontaneous evolutionary change is brought by this process called mutation. Alright, now the transition from one stage to the other stage. So what happens? The transition is also the basic feature of ecology because there is a change in evolution. So one phase you are there and then you go to the other phase. So it means there is in-between phase as well. Who will address that? So that is what is important, that it is also a basic principle that transition stage of sequential changes from one vegetation community, if you talk about only vegetation community, that is called sere. So what is sere? Seral community. It is in-betweenness, which is in the transition. Now, look at ecological succession. This is another feature. This is another basic principle of ecology. The ecological succession, right from the rocks, then lichens, grasses, mixed herbs, shrubs, transition species, young forest, mature forest, to the apex climax species. What is happening? Can you see in the image? This is what is succession. Success, what we say. This is how success looks like naturally. Okay, success doesn't mean having money. That doesn't come up. All this concept comes from nature. So nature has given a definition of success in the form of ecological succession, not in the form of having, a mansion, a car, a plane. That is success defined by human beings in their context. But natural succession is what you see in the image, right? This is what is natural ecological succession, reaching the apex, reaching the climax. Okay, remember that. The ecosystem is mainly modified by humans through exploitation of natural resources. We all understand this very clearly these days, especially during lockdown. What is happening? The ecosystem is modified by human beings to such a level that when it is left out, then we actually realize that how much are we exploiting the natural resources. So what happens? That human beings reduce ecological diversity. The natural way it is evolving and it is diversifying, human beings are responsible for reduction in that, and also leads to complexity when we remove certain species. So because of our ecosystem services that we proudly say, that we are related to ecosystem services, we are supporting ecosystem services. Remember, one way or the other, we are trying to consume nature. We are trying to not let it work the way it is naturally supposed to. We are hindering that process. So that becomes one of the important process, that if we hinder, as we are prone to that thing, so that becomes another basic building concept of ecology when we talk in terms of human beings. So that is what is part of human ecology in details when we study it. So what happens? How human beings are linked to the ecological principles. How do they modify it? What are the responsible and irresponsible behavior through which they tend to reduce diversity, right? And the last one is conservation, that we say preserve the diversity. In the World Forum, we talk about geodiversity, biodiversity, conservation, and we need a universal response for that. It is not an individual response, but it is collective response that is important for the ecological restoration, for the preservation. That's what the basic principle is. Right from the inception to the preservation, these are the 20 basic principles of ecology that everyone must understand and then plan their footprints, that we say ecological footprints. So thank you so much for listening to today's session. If you have any queries, please write to me on my email, and also you can like and subscribe to my Instagram handle, which is TheGeoecolologist, and also my website you can visit TheGeoecolologist.com. But do not forget to like and subscribe my channel and press the bell icon for the